Usually when we talk about ancient legal documents, there's this, there's this expectation of just dry, dusty bureaucracy.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, like reading the terms and conditions on a modern software update or something.
Exactly. You picture just scrolling rapidly to the bottom of the screen, hitting accept, and, just moving on with your life.
Right, without ever really absorbing what it is you just legally bound yourself to. I mean, it's entirely transactional for us.
Yeah, we view those documents as as an obstacle standing between us and the thing we actually want to do.
Because the language is deliberately opaque, right?
Yeah.
It's designed by a committee of lawyers to protect liability, not to impart, like, profound wisdom.
But then you step into the world of ancient Israelite literature. And specifically, you step into a book that, let's be honest, historically causes most modern readers' eyes to just glaze over entirely.
Yes, Leviticus.
Right. Suddenly, that terms and conditions document is no longer just a list of esoteric rules about mold and goat entrails.
No, we're looking at a landscape that is quite literally a matter of national survival and cosmic order, really.
A survival manual disguised as a legal code.
Exactly. And it was written for a people who were standing on the absolute brink of cultural annihilation.
And that is the exact premise we are unpacking today for you on this deep dive. We are taking on a text that is arguably the most skipped over book in human history.
It really is. I mean, think about it. You start reading the ancient texts, and Genesis gives you the creation of the universe.
Right. Epic floods, deep family drama.
Yeah, and then you move into Exodus, and you have these cinematic plagues, the parting of the Red Sea, these high-stakes political escapes.
And then you hit Leviticus, and it's just boom.
The great narrative roadblock.
Yeah. The story just grinds to a halt, and you're suddenly reading incredibly granular instructions on like how to properly butcher a bull.
Or how to diagnose a skin rash. It feels like reading a training manual for an ancient butcher shop crossed with a public health textbook.
It really does. But our source for today's deep dive flips that modern assumption completely on its head. We're pulling from a fascinating, really paradigm-shifting book called Understanding Leviticus, the Heart of Israelite Worship.
By Rev Dr. Antonio Arnold.
Right. And Dr. Arnold is, he's uniquely positioned to unpack a text like this because his background is so incredibly multifaceted.
Oh, it's amazing. He brings a lens to this ancient material that you simply do not find in standard academic commentaries.
Yeah, that specific detail is what immediately pulled me in. I mean, this isn't just an ivory tower theologian who's spent his entire life, tucked away in a library.
No, not at all. Dr. Arnold is a former military officer.
We're talking about a man who earned an airborne badge, which means he's qualified in military parachute operations.
And he wears an infantry cord. He served as an Army non-commissioned officer and an officer holding positions like platoon leader, company executive officer.
And he has a wall of commendations, including medals for his service in the global war on terrorism.
Which is key, right? Because it means he deeply understands the necessity of logistics, of standard operating procedures and discipline within a unit.
Yeah, he knows what it takes to keep a group of people alive, cohesive, and functioning under, extreme, life-threatening pressure.
But simultaneously, he's pursued this really rigorous, lifelong academic and pastoral path.
Right. Multiple advanced degrees from institutions like Cornell University and Liberty University.
Ranging from theological studies to a Doctor of Divinity. And he actively serves as a pastor in Virginia.
So you have this strategic, logistical mind of a combat-trained military officer, combined with the analytical rigor of a Cornell scholar.
And tempered by the empathy and, the community focus of a pastor.
So when a guy with an airborne badge tells you that a book of ancient rules is actually a brilliant high-stakes strategy for surviving the collapse of a civilization.
You sit up and listen.
Exactly. So the mission for us today is to decode these ancient, seemingly bizarre, and honestly very bloody rituals.
And by following Dr. Arnold's analysis, we are going to uncover a surprisingly sophisticated blueprint for community identity.
Yeah, and for aggressive social justice and just the fundamental human search for the divine.
To really grasp the architecture of that blueprint, though, we need to look at the foundation first.
Right. So Leviticus is the third book of the Pentateuch.
Right. Penta, meaning 5. Tuch, meaning scrolls. The first 5 books of the Hebrew Bible. Together, they form what is known as the Torah.
And this is where Dr. Arnold asks us to completely recalibrate our vocabulary, right? Because in common English conversation, we translate Torah simply as law.
Yes, which immediately triggers that terms and conditions mindset we were just talking about.
Yeah, it sounds like a penal code. Do this or go to jail.
But the Hebrew root for the word Torah is YRH, and YRH does not mean legislation or penal code.
Wait, really? What does it mean?
It means to teach or to instruct. It's actually related to the imagery of an archer shooting an arrow, pointing the way, hitting a mark.
Wow, okay. That changes the flavor entirely. Because if it's a penal code, the goal is just compliance, right? Just avoiding punishment.
Exactly. But if it's instruction, the goal is transformation. It's a profound pedagogical tool.
So Leviticus isn't just barking arbitrary orders at the ancient Israelites to see if they'll submit.
No, it's actively trying to teach a newly formed or newly reformed nation how to exist.
Shaping their internal character so they can survive proximity to a holy God.
And perhaps more importantly, so they can survive each other without, tearing their society apart.
Okay, but before we get into the actual curriculum of that instruction, we have to deal with a massive foundational question.
Authorship. Who actually wrote this down?
Right, because if this is a survival manual, understanding the crisis that prompted its creation completely changes how we read it.
And this brings us into a highly complex area of scholarly debate that Dr. Arnold navigates in the text.
Because traditionally, for thousands of years, the authorship of Leviticus has been attributed singularly to Moses.
The Mosaic authorship view. Yeah. The image we all have from the movies. Right?
Yeah. Moses comes down from Mount Sinai. He has the tablets. He has the direct dictation from God.
And he writes it all out for the Israelites while they are wandering in the desert. And the text itself presents this framing.
Right. Almost every chapter begins with some variation of, and the Lord spoke to Moses.
Exactly. It presents a singular, authoritative, real-time voice giving instructions to a group of people who have just escaped slavery in Egypt.
They're trying to figure out how to be a free nation in the wilderness. But the modern academic consensus, which Dr. Arnold examines, introduces a very different mechanism.
Yeah, modern biblical criticism operates largely on what is known as the documentary hypothesis.
Which is the idea that the Pentateuch, including Leviticus, wasn't just written by one person in a single historical moment.
Right. Instead, it was composed, compiled, woven together, and edited from multiple earlier sources by various redactors or editors over several centuries.
And the specific material in Leviticus is primarily attributed to what scholars call the priestly source, or P.
Yes.
I have to be honest, when I first encountered the documentary hypothesis years ago, it felt incredibly deflating.
Oh, sure. I hear that a lot.
I mean, if this text wasn't handed down by Moses on a thundering mountain, doesn't it lose its authority? The idea of a sacred text being edited by a committee of unnamed priests over hundreds of years.
It sounds like a corporate board, right?
Yes, like they're continually revising a company manifesto until it's completely stripped of its soul.
It's a very common reaction. We tend to value the idea of the solitary genius receiving sudden inspiration.
Right.
But to understand why these ancient redactors were compiling this text, you have to understand the specific historical nightmare they were living through.
Because we aren't talking about a board committee sitting in a comfortable boardroom.
Not at all. Scholars place the final redaction and compilation of this priestly material during the post-Babylonian exile period, roughly the 6th to 5th centuries BCE.
Okay, let's stop and really paint the picture of what the Babylonian exile was. Because calling it an exile almost sounds too polite.
It sounds like a forced vacation.
Yeah, exactly.
But it was a catastrophic, apocalyptic collapse of their entire known world. In 587 BCE, the Babylonian Empire, led by King Nebuchadnezzar, breached the walls of Jerusalem.
After a brutal, starving siege.
Yes, and they didn't just conquer the city. They systematically dismantled the Israelite identity. They burned the Temple of Solomon to the ground.
And the temple wasn't just like a big church for them. It was the absolute epicenter of their cosmos.
It was where heaven and earth overlapped. It was the literal footstool of their god.
So to see the temple burn wasn't just a military defeat. It was a profound theological crisis.
Massive. In the ancient Near Eastern mindset, if your city was conquered and your temple was destroyed, it meant your god had been defeated by the god of the conquering army.
Wow, so it meant Yahweh had lost to Marduk, the patron god of Babylon.
Exactly. So they are dealing with the physical trauma of war, starvation, and death, compounded by the terrifying thought that the God who promised to protect them was either dead, defeated, or had abandoned them.
That is just That's devastating.
And furthermore, the Babylonians employed a specific geopolitical strategy to prevent rebellions. They decapitated the society.
Meaning they rounded up the royal family, the educated elite, the artisans.
And crucially, the priests. They force-marched them hundreds of miles across the harsh terrain of the ancient Near East, relocating them into the heart of Babylon.
Stripping them of their land, their monarchy, and their central place of worship.
So you have this traumatized, fractured community of Israelites living as captives in the most powerful, cosmopolitan, and polytheistic empire in the world.
Surrounded by massive ziggurats, different languages, different gods. The pressure to assimilate, to just give up and become Babylonian must have been overwhelming.
It was an existential threat to their cultural memory. In an oral culture, if you assimilate, your history vanishes in a single generation.
And this is where the redactors, the priestly writers, come in.
Yes. They weren't a corporate committee drafting a soulless document. They were desperate survivors sifting through the wreckage of their civilization.
They gathered their ancestral traditions, their oral laws, their historical memories, and they began to codify them.
Because they realized that if they didn't write this down, if they didn't create a rigid, portable structure for their identity, the people of Israel would disappear from the earth.
That completely flips the script for me.
Yeah.
Instead of viewing Leviticus as a sterile legal document, it becomes this defiant act of preservation.
Yes, exactly.
It's like a nation drafting an emergency constitution in the ashes of a nuclear war.
That's a perfect analogy.
They are writing down exactly who they are, how they relate to the divine, and how they must behave, so that even without a king, without a land, and without a physical temple, they can survive as a distinct people.
And the brilliance of the priestly redaction is that they created a portable sanctuary through the text.
A portable sanctuary.
Yes. By meticulously detailing the instructions for the ancient wilderness tabernacle, which is the setting for Leviticus, they were reminding the exiled people that God's presence wasn't permanently tethered to a stone building in Jerusalem.
Right. God first dwelt with them in a tent in the desert.
Which means God can dwell with them in exile in Babylon.
That is beautiful. So whether you hold to the traditional view of Moses writing this in the Sinai desert, or this scholarly view of priests compiling it in Babylon, the function is identical.
Exactly. It is a blueprint for organizing chaos. It is a people striving to define their boundaries, to understand why disaster struck them, and to figure out how to live holy lives in a deeply unholy, unpredictable world.
Okay, so if you are a community trying to rebuild your fractured universe, where do you start?
According to Leviticus, you start with the absolute center of ancient life, which is worship.
But ancient worship didn't mean, sitting in pews singing hymns.
No, not at all. It meant a highly sensory, visceral, and complex system of animal sacrifices.
Right. Chapters 1 through 7 of Leviticus are entirely devoted to this sacrificial system, which, to a modern reader, is alien, it is bloody, and it feels incredibly primitive.
It does. I mean, you read these chapters, and it's just splashing blood on altars, burning kidney fat, and slaughtering pigeons.
It's the part of the Bible where most reading plans go to die.
It really is. But Dr. Arnold provides a framework that makes profound psychological sense of this system.
Okay, lay it on us.
He notes that Leviticus divides the offerings into two distinct, overarching categories: the sweet savor offerings and the non-sweet savor offerings.
Let's unpack the sweet savor category first.
Yeah.
Because the text constantly repeats this phrase, that the smoke of the offering goes up as a pleasing aroma or a sweet savor to the Lord.
Right. These offerings are voluntary. They aren't about fixing a sin. They are about expressing devotion, gratitude, and a desire for fellowship with the divine.
Okay.
And within this category, there are three primary types. The first is the olah, which is translated as the burnt offering.
This is the one where the entire animal, whether it's a bull, a sheep, or a bird, is placed on the altar and completely consumed by fire. Nothing is saved.
Exactly. And in an ancient agrarian economy, an unblemished bull represents a massive amount of wealth.
Yeah, it takes years to raise, it provides labor, it is capital.
So to take that animal, slaughter it, and burn the entirety of it into ash is a radical act of total surrender.
Wow. The worshiper receives no meat back. The priest receives no meat.
It is a physical manifestation of saying, everything I have, even my most valuable asset, ultimately belongs to you, and I dedicate it to you without reservation.
So it's an economic sacrifice as much as a religious one.
Very much so.
Then you have the second type, the mincha, or the grain offering.
Now, the mincha is unique because it involves no bloodshed. It consists of fine flour, usually mixed with olive oil and frankincense, baked or roasted.
And a portion is burned on the altar as a memorial. and the rest is given to the priests to eat. But why grain?
Because grain represents the daily sustenance of human labor. You plow the field, you plant the seed, you harvest, you thresh, you grind the flour.
It's backbreaking work.
Exactly. So by offering the mincha, the worshiper is taking the direct result of their own labor and acknowledging that the ability to work, the fertility of the soil, and the provision of daily bread all originate from God.
It is the ultimate expression of gratitude for just the mundane necessities of life.
Right. And then we get to the third sweet savor offering, which is the shilamim, the peace offering or fellowship offering.
And this one completely challenged my assumptions about ancient religion.
It's perhaps the most joyous of all the rituals. It's offered to celebrate a blessing, to fulfill a vow, or simply as a spontaneous act of thanksgiving.
But the mechanics of the shalomim are what make it so unique, right?
Yes, the animal is slaughtered, the blood is applied to the altar, and the internal fat, the suet, is burned for God.
Okay.
A specific portion, usually the breast and the right thigh, is given to the priests, but the vast majority of the meat is given back to the worshiper.
Wait, so they are taking this meat back to their tent?
They don't just take it back, they are commanded to eat it, usually within a day or two, depending on the specific type of vow.
But here's the catch. A single family cannot eat an entire cow or a large sheep in 2 days before it spoils in the desert heat.
So you have to invite people.
Exactly. You must invite your extended family, your friends, the poor, the marginalized. The shilamim forces the creation of a massive communal feast.
Let's think about the reality of the ancient diet for a second. The average Israelite was not eating steak on a Tuesday.
No, meat was an incredible luxury, usually reserved for massive festivals or the arrival of an honored guest.
Right. Their daily diet was bread, legumes, maybe some fish or cheese. So when someone offers a shilamim, it triggers a massive neighborhood barbecue.
It's a profound socio-religious event.
And the theology behind it is beautiful. Think about who is sharing this meal. You have the worshiper, their community, the priests who represent the religious structure, and God, who receives the smoke of the fat.
So the altar becomes a shared dining table. You are sitting down, breaking bread, and eating meat in fellowship with the creator of the universe.
It's not about appeasing an angry deity, it's about intimacy.
That is the essence of the sweet savor offerings. They maintain and celebrate a healthy relationship.
But Leviticus is brutally realistic about human nature. It knows that relationships break down. We harm each other, we break the rules, we defile the community.
And that brings us to the second overarching category, the non-sweet savor offerings.
The tone of the text shifts dramatically here. We are no longer talking about pleasing aromas and community barbecues.
No, we're talking about the chitat, the sin offering, and the asham, the guilt or reparation offering.
These are mandatory when a person realizes they have committed an offense, either against a specific command of God or against their neighbor.
So the focus here is entirely on atonement, purification, and restitution.
If the sweet savor is about celebrating the relationship, the non-sweet savor is about repairing a rupture in the cosmic order.
And Dr. Arnold details the physical mechanics of bringing a sin offering. And it is incredibly visceral.
Yes, it is.
I mean, if I realize I have committed a sin, I don't just hand a goat to a priest at the gate and walk away to let him do the dirty work.
Not at all. The text requires the worshiper to be intimately, physically involved in the death of the animal.
The ritual requires the concept of simika, or the laying on of hands.
The worshiper must bring the animal to the entrance of the tabernacle. They must place their hand firmly on the head of the live animal.
Imagine the sensory reality of that moment. You know you have lied or stolen or broken a covenant. You feel the weight of that moral failure.
And you walk this animal through the camp.
You reach out and press your hand onto its skull. You feel the coarse hair. You feel the heat radiating from its body. You feel it breathing, its chest expanding and contracting. You feel its pulse.
And in that intense tactile moment, there is a symbolic psychological transfer occurring.
The worshiper is visually and tangibly transferring their guilt, their impurity, their failure onto this innocent, unblemished proxy.
And then the worshiper themselves, not the priest, is the one who slits the animal's throat.
The priest is there to catch the blood and manage the altar, but the worshiper initiates the sacrifice.
The psychological closure that must have provided is staggering.
It really is. Today, if we feel abstract guilt, we might talk it out in therapy or write a journal entry or just let it eat away at us in the middle of the night.
We have no physical mechanism for processing the reality of our own destructive behavior.
But the ancient Israelite had an absolute definitive resolution. They saw the cost of their sin play out in real time.
An innocent life ended because of their actions. It takes the abstract concept of grace and consequence and turns it into a shocking, unforgettable physical reality.
It reinforces the gravity of their actions. Sin is not just a personal oops, it introduces death and chaos into the world.
And it requires blood, the symbol of life, to cleanse the sanctuary and restore the balance.
Now, obviously, the Israelites were not the only ancient civilization slaughtering animals on altars.
No, the entire ancient Near East was covered in temples doing exactly this.
But Dr. Arnold provides a brilliant comparative religion context that shows how radically different the Israelite system was from their neighbors.
Right. If you look at ancient Mesopotamia, which was the cultural dominant force of the era, their view of sacrifice was highly transactional and fundamentally pessimistic.
In what way?
In their mythological epics, like the Atrahasis epic, the gods created humans solely because the gods were tired of doing agricultural labor.
Wow. So humans were created to dig canals and farm the land to feed the gods.
Yes. So when a Mesopotamian offered a sacrifice, they were literally serving dinner to a deity.
And if humans failed to sacrifice,
The gods would grow weak from hunger and send plagues or floods out of irritation. So the sacrificial system was essentially an agricultural protection racket.
here is a goat. Please ensure the Tigris River floods so we don't starve. It's a bribe.
Precisely. Now, moving to ancient Egypt, the system was more complex. Egyptian religion centered on the concept of Ma'at.
Which is the foundational cosmic order, truth, and balance. And the opposite of Ma'at was Isfet, or chaos.
Exactly. And the pharaoh's primary job was to maintain Ma'at.
So the daily temple rituals, the massive offerings of food, drink, and incense before the statues of the gods, were the mechanism that kept the universe from unraveling.
Right. If the ritual stopped, the sun might not rise, the Nile might not flood, and chaos would consume the world. It was a mechanical maintenance of the universe.
And what about in Eastern traditions?
If you look at ancient Vedic Hinduism in India, the sacrificial rituals known as yajnas were incredibly powerful.
Okay.
The fire god, Agni, acted as the messenger, consuming the offerings like ghee and the soma plant and carrying them to the other deities.
These rituals were essential for maintaining Dharma, the cosmic law and order.
Yes, and the precision of the ritual was paramount. A mispronounced mantra could alter the fabric of reality.
So in all these surrounding cultures, sacrifice is a mechanism to feed the divine, bribe the divine, or mechanically manipulate the fabric of the universe.
Right.
How does the Levitical system stand apart?
The stark contrast is that Yahweh, the God of Israel, emphatically does not need to eat.
Yeah, in the Psalms, God actually mocks the idea, saying, "If I were hungry, I would not tell you. For the world and its fullness are mine. Do I eat the flesh of bulls or drink the blood of goats?"
That is a massive theological insult to every surrounding religion.
It's a complete paradigm shift. In Leviticus, God does not need the sacrifice.
The sacrifice is a gracious mechanism provided by God to the humans, so that the humans can survive dwelling in the presence of ultimate holiness.
The focus is not on manipulating nature. The focus is on a covenantal relationship. It is about moral purity.
You don't bring a goat to make it rain. You bring a goat to cleanse the sanctuary from the moral pollution of your own community's sins.
But a system this complex, this dangerous, and this vital to the survival of the nation cannot be run by amateurs.
No, absolutely not. You can't just have thousands of Israelites showing up with bulls and lighting fires wherever they want.
You need a highly specialized, highly regulated team of professionals to manage this intersection of heaven and earth.
Which brings us to the mediators. The tribe of Levi, and specifically the Aaronic priesthood.
Chapters 8 through 10 of Leviticus pivot away from the rules of the sacrifices and focus on the men who will perform them.
Right. Moses' brother, Aaron, and his sons are consecrated in an elaborate 7-day ordination ceremony.
They are washed, clothed in incredibly specific sacred garments, anointed with oil, and marked with the blood of sacrifices.
They are being transformed from regular men into human conduits between the profane camp and the holy presence of God.
But Dr. Arnold's analysis of the Levites shows that we often misunderstand their role.
We do. We tend to view them just as ancient butchers standing waist-deep in blood all day, tossing meat on a fire.
But their societal function was vastly more comprehensive.
They were the intellectual, spiritual, and administrative backbone of the Israelite civilization.
Yeah, yes, they managed the complex logistics of the altar, ensuring the right wood was burned, the blood was applied to the correct horns of the altar.
And that the fat was separated properly. But outside the tabernacle courtyard, They were the nation's educators.
The Torah was their textbook.
They were tasked with teaching the intricate laws, the narratives, and the ethics to the people.
Furthermore, they acted as the judicial system. When there were disputes between neighbors or complex legal cases, the priests were the ones who discerned the application of the law.
And perhaps most surprisingly to a modern reader, they were the ancient equivalent of the CDC.
Which is wild. They were public health officials.
Absolutely. If an Israelite developed a strange rash, or if an infectious mold broke out in the walls of a house, you didn't call a physician, you called a priest.
And the priest would examine the affliction, determine if it was a threat to the community, and enforce strict quarantine protocols.
So they are butchers, professors, Supreme Court justices, and epidemiologists all rolled into one hereditary tribe.
You would think that this level of influence would make them incredibly wealthy and powerful like the feudal lords of Europe.
Right.
But Dr. Arnold highlights a socioeconomic reality of the Levites that completely subverts that expectation.
Yeah, when the Israelites eventually settled in the land of Canaan, the land was divided among the tribes. The tribe of Judah got a massive territory, Ephraim got land, Manasseh got land.
And this land was the source of all wealth. It allowed them to farm, build estates, and pass generational wealth to their children.
But the Levites got nothing.
No territorial inheritance whatsoever. They were intentionally dispersed among the other tribes, living in designated cities, but they owned no agricultural tracts.
They were a landless elite.
So how did they eat?
They survived entirely on the economic system of the tithe, or the mazer, and the portions of the sacrifices we discussed earlier.
The other 11 tribes were commanded to bring a tenth of their agricultural yield, their grain, their wine, their livestock, to support the Levites.
Okay, let's explore the psychology of the system, because this is brilliant social engineering.
On the surface, being completely landless makes the Levites incredibly vulnerable.
Very. If there is a drought, they are the first to starve because they can't grow their own emergency crops.
Or if the people simply decide to stop being religious and stop bringing their tithes, the Levites go bankrupt overnight.
We actually see this happen later in biblical history in the book of Nehemiah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The people stopped bringing the tithes, and the Levites literally had to abandon the temple and go work in the fields as day laborers just to survive, causing the entire religious structure to collapse.
So they're deeply vulnerable to the whims of the public. But does that vulnerability actually force them to become the most powerful advocates for social justice in the nation?
Yes. Because, think about it, the Levites cannot retreat to a walled estate and ignore the plight of the common people.
Right. They're inextricably linked to the economic and spiritual health of the average farmer.
If the priests are corrupt, or if they allow the society to become unjust and the people abandon the covenant, the priests lose their food supply.
It forces a symbiotic reciprocal relationship. The Levites had a vested survival-level interest in ensuring that the nation was functioning ethically.
That the poor were not being oppressed to the point of rebellion, and that the people remained deeply devoted to God.
By stripping them of the ability to hoard territorial wealth, the system designed by Leviticus prevents the priesthood from becoming an isolated, wealthy aristocracy that doesn't care about the peasantry.
Their poverty is the source of their influence. It is a brilliant system of checks and balances.
But managing that influence and managing their physical proximity to the altar carried a terrifying risk.
Yes, and right in the middle of these instructions, Leviticus interrupts the flow of the manual with a shocking, brutal narrative.
We are talking about the tragedy of Nadab and Abihu in Leviticus chapter 10.
These are Aaron's two oldest sons. They have just gone through the 7-day ordination. They are wearing the sacred garments.
They are at the peak of their spiritual careers.
And the text says that Nadab and Abihu each took his censer, put fire in it, laid incense on it, and offered unauthorized fire, or in Hebrew, esh zara, strange fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them.
And the response is instantaneous. Fire flashes out from the presence of the Lord and consumes them.
They drop dead right there in the courtyard of the sanctuary, in their sacred robes.
It is one of the most chilling moments in the entire Hebrew Bible. What exactly did they do? What constitutes strange fire?
Well, scholars have debated this for centuries because the text is deliberately vague.
Right.
Some suggest they were intoxicated because immediately after this event, God gives a command forbidding priests from drinking wine before entering the tent.
Interesting.
Others suggest they tried to enter the Holy of Holies, the innermost sanctuary, at the wrong time.
Still others believe they used fire from a common hearth rather than the sacred fire of the altar.
Or perhaps they were incorporating a pagan Canaanite ritual they had seen into the worship of Yahweh.
Whatever the specific infraction was, the core issue seems to be presumption. They decided that they, rather than God, could dictate the terms of engagement.
Exactly. They treated the holy as if it were common.
And that is exactly why this horrific story is placed right here in the manual. It serves as a stark, terrifying illustration to the entire nation.
It shatters any illusion that these rituals are just empty symbolic theater.
The presence of God is a consuming fire. It is a raw, unimaginably powerful force.
To approach it casually or to alter the instructions out of arrogance is akin to walking into a nuclear reactor without a hazmat suit.
It wasn't just a liturgical faux pas. They didn't just sing the wrong verse of a hymn. They endangered the entire camp.
The priests held the safety of the nation in their hands, and improper worship could lead to communal calamity.
It underscores a fundamental theme of Leviticus, which is that holiness is dangerous to the impure.
Exactly.
So we've established that the tabernacle is this incredibly dangerous, holy hotspot in the center of the camp, managed by a terrified and highly disciplined priesthood.
But how does this concept of holiness extend beyond the tent flaps?
Right. How does it affect the average Israelite mother or farmer or tradesman on a random Tuesday afternoon when they're miles away from the altar?
That brings us to the section of Leviticus that modern readers often find the most perplexing. Chapters 11 through 16, which cover the comprehensive laws of clean and unclean.
In Hebrew, the concepts of tahora, which is clean or pure, and tuma, unclean or impure.
This section reads like an obsessively detailed taxonomy.
It dictates which animals you can and cannot eat. It outlines the impurities associated with childbirth. It spends entire chapters detailing the quarantine protocols for various skin diseases.
And it even discusses how to handle mildew in the stones of a house.
For a long time, particularly in the 19th and early 20th centuries, scholars and commentators tried to explain away these laws purely through the lens of ancient hygiene.
Or primitive public health.
Right. The classic example is pork. People will confidently say, oh, the ancient Israelites banned eating pigs because pigs carry trichinosis, and without modern refrigeration, pork was dangerous.
So God was just giving them a medical diet.
Yeah. Or they say the hand-washing rituals were just an ancient discovery of germ theory.
But Dr. Arnold explicitly points out that while some of these practices certainly had tangential health benefits, reducing these laws merely to ancient medical advice is a massive misunderstanding of the ancient worldview.
Because these laws were not about physical health, they were deeply theological.
Let's break that down. If it isn't about avoiding trichinosis, why on earth does the creator of the universe care whether a fish has fins and scales or whether a bird is a predator or a scavenger?
Why is a cow clean, but a camel is unclean?
To understand this, we have to look at the work of anthropologists like Mary Douglas, who really revolutionized how we view Leviticus.
Oh, her work is fascinating.
She argued that the clean and unclean laws are about matter out of place. In the worldview of Leviticus, God created the world with distinct boundaries and categories.
We see this in Genesis chapter 1, right? God separates the light from the dark, the land from the sea, the animals of the earth from the birds of the air.
Yes. Order is divine. Chaos is anti-divine.
So an animal is considered clean if it perfectly fits its God-given category.
Exactly. A proper land animal, according to their taxonomy, has fully parted hooves and chews the cud. A cow or a sheep fits perfectly.
But a pig?
A pig has parted hooves, but it does not chew the cud. It violates the boundary. It is an anomaly.
And anomalies represent chaos.
Yes. A proper fish has fins and scales to navigate the water. An eel or a lobster or a crab lacks these proper aquatic features.
They are categorical rule breakers, therefore they are unclean.
They symbolically represent the chaotic, unformed elements of the universe that resist God's ordering structure.
It's a theology of the mundane. The clean represents life, order, wholeness, and proximity to the divine. The unclean represents chaos, disorder, and death.
And death is the ultimate impurity because God is the source of all life.
Which is why human bodily discharges, particularly those related to reproduction or disease, render a person unclean.
The loss of reproductive fluids is a symbolic loss of life force. A skin disease that causes the flesh to rot is a visual representation of death taking hold of a living body.
It's not that the person has sinned. It's that they have come into contact with the realm of mortality.
Exactly.
I love to think of the dietary laws, the kashrut, as a sort of spiritual uniform or a relentless psychological boundary.
Imagine the mental discipline this requires.
Every single time you sit to eat a meal, your very menu is a physical reminder of your theological identity.
You look at your plate and you have to make a conscious decision. I cannot eat that eel or that pork because I am an Israelite.
We are a people separated from the chaotic nations around us,
Yeah.
just as God separated the light from the dark.
It forces constant mindfulness into the most basic, repetitive human action, which is eating.
You cannot compartmentalize your faith. You couldn't just go to the tabernacle on a festival day, perform a sacrifice, and then forget about God for the next 6 months.
No, your diet, the fabric of your clothing, the state of your physical health, every moment of your physical existence was intertwined with your spiritual standing.
And what happens if they ignore these boundaries? Dr. Arnold highlights a specific, terrifying verse that anchors the necessity of this entire purity system.
Leviticus 15.31.
Yes.
It is the fulcrum of the book. It says, "Thus you shall keep the people of Israel separate from their uncleanness, lest they die in their uncleanness by defiling my tabernacle that is in their midst."
Lest they die. The stakes never drop.
God's presence was literally dwelling in a tent in the geometric center of their encampment. The pure, life-giving holiness of God cannot coexist with the impurity of death and chaos.
It is like trying to mix matter and antimatter. The reaction is violently destructive.
So the separation of the clean from the unclean wasn't a quirky cultural aesthetic. Purity was the absolute prerequisite for proximity to the divine.
If the camp became entirely defiled, if the Israelites embraced chaos, God's presence would be forced to leave the camp.
And for an ancient Israelite surrounded by hostile deserts and enemy nations, the departure of God's presence meant the immediate removal of their protection.
It meant total abandonment and certain destruction. Maintaining purity was quite literally how they kept the shield up.
We have spent a massive amount of time looking inward today.
We have. The first 16 chapters of Leviticus are deeply personal, deeply physical, and entirely focused on keeping the individual and the immediate camp ritually pure.
But then we hit chapter 17 and the camera zooms way out.
We move from the personal plate to the public square.
This brings us to a distinct literary section that scholars refer to as the Holiness Code, which encompasses chapters 17 through the end of the book in chapter 27.
If the first half of Leviticus is about how an individual can safely approach a holy God without dying, the Holiness Code is about how an entire society can actually live like that holy God.
And it is anchored by one specific, famous, overarching command found in Leviticus 19.2. "Speak to all the congregation of the people of Israel and say to them, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy."
You shall be holy, for I am holy. That isn't just a rule. That is the thesis statement for their entire civilization.
It is the ultimate imitation of the divine. And what is so revolutionary about the Holiness Code is how it defines that imitation.
Right. It explicitly, aggressively intertwines ritual purity with social ethics.
It utterly shatters the idea that you can be spiritually holy in the temple while being socially corrupt in the marketplace.
Its ethics is worship.
Exactly. When we read Leviticus 19, we find commands about not eating meat with blood in it, right next to commands about not harvesting the edges of your fields.
Let's focus on that agricultural law, the law of piyah, or gleaning, because it was brilliant.
It is. The text commands the Israelite farmers not to reap to the very edges of their field and not to go back and strip the vineyard bare a second time.
They are ordered to leave the corners of the fields unharvested. Why?
The text explicitly states, "You shall leave them for the poor and for the sojourner."
The psychological discipline required for a farmer to do this is immense. You have worked the land. The grain in that corner belongs to you.
To leave it there, intentionally unharvested, goes against every human instinct of maximizing profit and ensuring your own family's security against winter.
But God is saying, I own the land, you are just tenants, and the rent you pay is ensuring that the marginalized do not starve.
And the Holiness Code doesn't stop at charity. It demands structural justice. It contains strict commands regarding business practices.
You shall do no wrong in judgment, in measures of length or weight or quantity. You shall have just balances, just weights.
No rigged scales in the marketplace, because cheating your neighbor financially is viewed as a direct violation of God's holiness.
Furthermore, the Holiness Code demands a radical ethic toward the other. Over and over, it commands the Israelites to treat the resident alien, the immigrant, the foreigner living among them, not just with tolerance, but with identical justice to the native-born.
And it gives a deeply emotional rationale. For you were strangers in the land of Egypt.
You know what it feels like to be oppressed, to be the marginalized minority. Do not replicate the trauma of Egypt in the land I am giving you.
It uses their historical trauma to forge radical empathy. That is the genius of the Holiness Code.
So how does this profoundly challenge the listener today? Because we live in a modern world that is built entirely on the concept of compartmentalization.
We draw a massive, thick line between our spiritual life and our secular life.
We view our spiritual life as what happens on a Sunday morning in a church, or Friday night in a synagogue or mosque, or even just our private time of meditation.
And the secular life is how we run our business, how we invest our money, how we vote, how we treat our employees, or how we speak to customer service workers on a Tuesday afternoon.
Dr. Arnold's analysis shows that if you dropped an ancient Israelite priest into our modern world, they wouldn't even understand the concept of a secular life.
In the worldview of Leviticus, the secular does not exist. There is only the holy and the profane.
Every action, every financial transaction, every meal, every sexual encounter is subject to the ethical demands of holiness.
True worship, according to the Holiness Code, is impossible without active participation in the well-being of others.
Your holiness is not measured simply by how accurately you perform a religious ritual or how perfectly you sing a hymn.
No, it is directly measured by your commitment to social justice, to economic equity, and to mercy.
If you bring the most expensive, unblemished bull to the altar, but you are systematically cheating your customers with rigged scales or exploiting your workers, your worship is not just invalid.
To God, it is an absolute abomination because you are misrepresenting the character of the God you claim to serve.
God is just. God is the protector of the vulnerable. You cannot claim to be holy if you are unjust.
It's an incredibly convicting standard, even thousands of years removed from the tabernacle.
This has been a massive journey today. We started with a book that most of the world dismisses as an irrelevant, dry, hyper-specific legal document about mold and goat blood.
And by applying Dr. Arnold's multifaceted lens, understanding the military-like discipline required for survival, the trauma of the Babylonian exile, and the profound theology of the mundane, we have revealed a masterful architectural blueprint.
It is a strategy designed to maintain cosmic order, to process the crushing weight of human guilt through the visceral reality of sacrifice.
And to forge a fractured community into a society where aggressive social justice and ethical holiness are the very definition of worship.
It is one of the most sophisticated documents of the ancient world, once you understand the profound why operating behind the confusing what.
And to you, listening right now, this is exactly why we do these deep dives.
Because digging into these ancient, difficult frameworks doesn't just give us fun historical trivia. It unearths the hidden roots of our own modern moral architecture.
It shows us how community identity is constructed, how trauma shapes law, and how fragile a society can be when it loses a unifying transcendent center.
It forces us to examine our own definitions of purity, justice, and devotion. The questions Leviticus asks of the ancient Israelites are the exact same questions it demands of us today.
They absolutely are.
Which brings me to a final lingering thought for you to carry with you this week. Leviticus used the incredibly specific rituals of daily meals, of agricultural harvesting, of managing disease, and of communal feasts to constantly, relentlessly remind the Israelites of their core values.
The mundane was weaponized to build character.
Exactly. So I want you to look around at your own life today. Look at the culture we inhabit. What are the rituals or daily habits that our modern society enforces?
What are the things we do repeatedly, ritually, without even thinking about them?
And imagine if an alien anthropologist came down to Earth and decided to write a modern holiness code based entirely on what we actually practice, where we spend our money, how we treat the vulnerable online, what media we consume like a daily diet, and what we sacrifice our time to.
What would that modern code reveal about what we truly worship?
We may have stopped reading the terms and conditions a long time ago, but we are still signing the contract with our actions every single day.
That is a profoundly uncomfortable and necessary question to ask ourselves.
It certainly is. The text demands it. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.